everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Talkin Tuong, the weekly quarantine show where I get to connect with my friends and family near and far to talk about the news that matters. Pop culture news, movies, that's it. Sometimes video games, but we cover the important shit on this show, and we have to do it on a weekly basis now because there's just so much stuff coming out and we have to cover it. But we also have an obligation to make the people happy. And I don't know anybody in this world happier, jubilant, jiggly, just great than James Beattie. I ran out of adjectives.
Puffy, all of it. It's me.
Yeah. James, I'm sorry for calling you jiggly. I don't know.
No, that's okay. Actually, I cringed a little bit when it first hit, but then I was like, no, you know what? You're not wrong.
James, thank you so much for being on your very first Talking Tongue appearance.
Yeah, this is exciting. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Can we call this calling?
I mean, I guess we're technically calling through the internet because that's all how the show runs these days. We can't see each other in person.
I could stand outside your home and like literally call at you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something we might resort to eventually.
Well, we actually have a restraining order. So
I forgot about the restraining order. Yeah, but that like still, I could yell from the 500. What is it? 500 feet in the language?
Is it 500?
I don't know, man. Your lawyer drew it up.
500 feet, I feel, is how the whole pandemic should have, they should have done that instead of 6 feet.
That probably would have helped us in the early days. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But hey, you know what? We're not here to talk about the pandemic. We're here to talk about things that are more important than that. Like, you know what? Who you are and how you've been keeping happy during the pandemic. Like, set the pandemic aside. What is James Beattie all about? And what do you do to just keep yourself just, jiggly and happy? I picked your Jigglypuff, the Pokemon, which is also a happy Pokemon. So
but like neither of those adjectives are kind adjectives to use on somebody. You don't want to call somebody jiggly or puffy. Neither of those things are great. But I brought that on myself. I am jiggly. I am puffy. I'll own both of those things.
Okay.
Allergies are rough, man. I am James Beattie. I work in education, but I really like pop culture-y things. I'm really into using pop culture to kind of shape what I do as a professional. So that's something that I try to keep on top of. I find that it helps me speak the languages that other people speak and helps me to get interactive with those people.
Keeps you hip?
Yeah, it keeps me with it. Yep.
Yeah, it keeps your vernacular to be slappin'.
Yeah.
Is that what the kids say?
No one has ever said that, no. But that's okay. You should start that and own
it. Yes, and what else have you been doing to, just to keep yourself glad, It's dark times, but you're a very positive human being. So we need to hear the things that just keep you, staying positive.
My kids have really helped with that. I have 2 kids and they're weird and funny. And so that's been really helpful even when we were kind of locked down and not able to see anybody. They definitely kept me going. I feel for people who didn't have anybody in those moments because, man, they certainly kept us going, kept things interesting. Mm-hmm. But I also recently snuck a PlayStation 4 into my house. And that was fun.
So you snuck by paying for a PlayStation 4 on a joint credit card with your wife.
Yeah, it sat undetected for well over a day. Nobody knew that it was there. It replaced the poor old PS3, which is going to be sent off to Mr. Thompson's farm later on this week. But that's a really exciting piece of tech. I've been talking about it, ruminating on it, trying to get people on board around here who also contribute to the financial decision making for a while. And we finally just kind of broke and said it's time to do it. And so I snuck it in.
Amazing. We talked about this off air, but I was like, I think it's a fantastic, funny thing that you bought a PlayStation 4 at the very end of a console generation when the new PlayStation's launching in 2 months or so. But
what's the opposite of an early adopter? It's me. I'm the opposite of an early adopter. That's okay. They're being good to us. The PlayStation overlords are benevolent. They're letting us continue to access some of the new games as they launch the PS5.
Yeah.
They've apologized to how they've done their pre-order process.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough times for video game giant corporations as well.
I feel bad for the corporations. That's what I always
I
say.
really am worried about the corporations more
You know,
than the people.
yeah. Is
The
Jeff Bezos
corporations.
okay? Is he okay? Should
We
somebody
should
check on
we should check on him. I have stopped calling him personally because
him?
his
Okay.
lawyers are not kind. They're not like your lawyers.
Yeah, mine are set a 500-foot boundary. They will come and get you.
Well, yeah,
And
but they remain jiggly and puffy through all this.
yes, yes. But Jigglypuff is a positive adjective for today. So there you go. Because James, you're a very happy person, and
We're taking it back.
I didn't know. And it's hard. I don't know that many J adjectives. Now I feel guilty for calling you Jigglypuff. But now I'm like, what else do we have? What
I do jump a lot. Like
jump?
Yeah.
Jumpy?
Well, I don't anymore. There was a trampoline park I used to frequent that I can't go to anymore because of the pandemic, not because of legal reasons or restraining orders.
Of course. Of course.
But I do jump. What else?
Jump. Justice. You fight for justice.
I will not admit to that in such a public forum.
All right. How about Jor-El? You are Jor-El, Superman's father.
Not strictly an adjective, but maybe it should be, right? Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe if we figure out talk about the Jor-El of that guy. Or say things more Jor-El.
That's right. Well, it sounds like pop culture, your family, the video games, that kind of stuff keep you happy, and having kids. So if you need something to keep you busy during the pandemic, consider popping out a child, I guess is what James is saying.
Don't kidnap though. Like, let's be good about this, people. We don't need kidnappings on top of all the other things that we're dealing with right now.
Right, yeah.
We're days away from Godzilla here.
Yeah. Do the kid thing the regular way, if you will. The birds and the bees thing. And wait several months for B to come out. There you go. That's how that works.
That is, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're the parents, so I would have to defer to you.
Well, and I mean, that wasn't my experience, but, not from around here in many ways. So.
Yes, because you're on Krypton, of course. James, we are going to go into the news of the week, pop culture news of the week. Very exciting stuff, and it's always really great to have a fellow nerd to talk about pop culture stuff, because sometimes I throw like video game news to people and they're like, Tong, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm gonna smile and nod because I'm a guest on your show. Today
I will not smile, nor will I nod.
Yeah, you don't do that.
I am looking very sternly at my screen right now, but go on.
Yeah, it's actually intimidating when you do that. So even though I can't see you, I can feel it
through the living force, as they say.
All right, let's start off with some fairly big news, and I've been meaning to try to really nerd out about this to somebody who would listen, a fellow Marvel geek, if you will. And have you heard the Ant-Man 3 news?
No.
Okay, here we go. So Lovecraft Country star, we have Jonathan Majors. He was also in Last Black Man in San Francisco. He's been in on a couple other things. To me, an up-and-comer, a fantastic actor. Jonathan Majors will be cast as Kang the Conqueror. How do you feel about that? Do you remember Kang the Conqueror?
Fantastic. I have been hoping that Kang was one of the places that they were going to start to walk toward. We know that they've acquired the X-Men. We know that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or whatever we're calling that now, is going to slowly have to figure out how to piece in all these other important things that they kind of left out along the way. Like, Tony Stark is a big deal. He's always a big deal. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But Fantastic Four is bigger, right? Like the first family of Marvel, they're a big deal. And we just haven't had any reference to a Baxter building of any kind this whole time.
They are bigger, like they are more legacy than Iron Man ever was, but in the current comic zeitgeist, like the Fantastic Four is an afterthought, and they've had nothing but bad movies, I would say.
Which is where they're at with the comic books. Like the reason that they haven't had decent titles or decent writers put on them for so long is absolutely because of Fox. Sorry, I'm pointing a finger again sternly at them, but that's where we're at.
Well, there's hope because we are getting Kang the Conqueror, quite possibly one of the most confusing villains in my mind for Marvel. How much do you know about Kang?
Like a fair bit, a fair bit. How much
Yeah,
do we know
you want
about any Marvel villain, really?
that's true. You want to give your cliff notes on who Kang the Conqueror is and why it's exciting to have him part of the MCU.
So Kang the Conqueror is like a reality bending character. Um, oh, you're putting me on the spot here, Tongue. It's gonna
Yeah. All right. I'll stoke
pull
the
up a
fires here.
synopsis. Yeah, get me going.
He is a time traveler, and the thing that makes him confusing, very confusing, is he has multiple versions of themselves with alter egos and different timelines.
Right, because I
So
remember him coming up quite a bit in the 2099 comics. Like that was a big deal.
right. So he's kind of all over the place, different versions of himself, where he's played the big bad guy, he's played Iron Lad. So he's also been a
Yeah,
good guy in some, iterations of himself. He's also been towing the line. I think overall he is technically a bad guy, but there are versions of himself, the same guy, that are good. And that's why he's confusing because he's all over the place.
yeah, and he doesn't have a consistent kind of arc or like a singular entity as a character. It's like a
Yeah.
little bit like Ultron. Like Ultron in the comic books has been generally evil, but evil with a purpose, and then he's spun out into so many different iterations. Like one of the big uh, cosmic Marvel events in the early 2000s, like 2006, 2007.
Mhm.
They ran the second Annihilation event, and it was all about Phalanx. So that is Ultron. It's Ultron in space turned into like a taking over people kind of villain.
Right, right. A classic villain plot is to take over people.
Well, and just to show
Uh,
up anywhere, right? It like,
yeah.
oh, it was Ultron all the time. I remember reading the Mighty Avengers in like 2000, probably 8 or 9, and
Hmm.
one of the big reveals there was like, oh, there's Ultron again, and it's something that they keep coming back to. I imagine that they'll probably try to bring that into the movies as well, or TV, or wherever they're at.
Right. I think there's some excitement to the villain in particular, because of the multiple versions of himself. That's really juicy for an actor to play, especially one as talented as Jonathan Majors, to be able to play like a version where he's just like all kind of consuming and he's like that big bad villain who's not Thanos level, but he's pretty big, to want to like rule the world with an iron fist kind of thing. And then you have his other versions of himself where he's Iron Lad. He's the one of the founding members. At least he was in the Young Avengers, I know that.
Yeah,
So he has like Iron Man technology and all that other stuff. And I would love to see multiple versions of himself kind of fight against one another. It just seems fun.
yeah. Oh, and that's definitely something they can move towards. And again, like I've said this a few times, but with WandaVision coming out, I feel like they're also moving towards putting Wanda as one of the villains, like one of the main villains. So it would
Yeah.
be interesting to see their version, their iteration of Kang the Conqueror looking like a villain, but then ending up having to help with the reality breakdowns that come from Wanda, and see where they would go with that.
So there we go. That is perfectly segues into our next story, which is WandaVision is still slated to come out later this year. I mean, there was a commercial that just came out that was kind of like a this is what's coming out in Disney Plus, like a
We're
30
still
second
here.
clip.
Yeah,
And it's still apparently happening. Famously was supposed to come out already, I believe, before or no, sorry, after Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but that has to still be. They just started to film that again, so WandaVision's coming out first, which is exciting.
yeah, and it looked like WandaVision was as close to being finished as they'd need it to, and it also seems like a show where like shooting isn't going to be as logistically a big problem. Like
Right.
Falcon and Winter Soldier, I feel like is one of these things where they've got lots of locations. It's hard to film without people and bustling crowds in the background, and
Hmm.
to have to do second unit shooting and reshoots when people are wearing masks all over the place suddenly, but they weren't when you did your all of your primary. That's a tough thing to have to figure out and explain
Oh
in
yeah,
story.
absolutely. And I think the most interesting thing about that is because Marvel has a very tight timeline of how they release their movies, which is our next story. But because it's their TV kind of in canon stuff. It's interesting to me they were able to make that shift very easily of being like, okay, you know what? It doesn't really matter if WandaVision comes out first and Falcon and the Winter Soldier comes out second, for example. Like, it just seems like those two are completely mutually exclusive things, and it's fine.
And this kind of like, so I want your take on this. I want Tung's insider intel here, but Disney Plus's model is still weekly release. So they've got these shows like Falcon Winter Soldier is going to be 8 episodes,
something like that. Sure,
something like that. So they're putting them out every Friday. That's kind of the plan. That's the model that Disney Plus has rolled with. How's that going to work around some of their big event movies? Because that was a problem when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was in its second season. You needed to see the TV show before you could go and see the movie, and you had to see the movie before you could watch the next week's TV show.
That show in particular just was like, you know what? We're done with like trying to connect everything, and then they're like, let's go to space. Let's go to like a different universe. Like, I feel like
time travel was great for that, right? Like, we're not even in your timeline anymore, so don't worry about it.
Don't worry. That stuff's definitely happening, but we will not address it.
That's how I use time travel on the regular. Don't worry.
Yeah,
this is a new timeline anyways. Don't worry about it.
That's how you get when your students ask you any question, you're like, you just explain it with time travel, and it confuses them and goes over their head.
You can explain away a lot with time travel. Ask Revenue Canada.
No, that's exactly. They know everything about time travel. James, to answer your question, it actually kind of goes into my next story here, which is Black Widow release expected to be postponed again, where this second part doesn't apply as much, but this is the second part of the headline, which is Pixar's Soul may go to Disney Plus. So to me, it sounds like the whole Marvel timeline and release schedule of their movies, they will shift it however meets their schedule, like creatively. And it's interesting to me because Mulan came out on Disney Plus, but it seems like they're very stubborn in wanting to release Black Widow any earlier than not having it in theaters. You know, like they want to have certain things come out at certain times and to hit theaters specifically. So
yeah, and there are important story beats that you don't want to miss out on. Like in the grand scheme of things, they need that theater experience to be able to have that level of control. I also wonder though if, and this is a terrible thing to say, but if this sort of shutdown wasn't a bit of a blessing for them, because they were speeding towards the release date of Disney Plus. They knew this was coming. They knew that they knew the Fox deal was closing, and they were speeding towards having to continue to pump out year after year all of this content. They can finally take some time to slow down and like really look at story and really think about what they want to do. And that's so vital. Guardians of the Galaxy took so long to, absolutely. Yeah. But from a story angle and making sure you're doing your writing well, I think this is a bit of a gift for them.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, Guardians of the Galaxy. What were you going to say about that?
Oh, just the Guardians of the Galaxy source material. There was so much to go through that they really had time to sit with that and to rewrite. And James Gunn could take the screenplay that was handed to him and kind of make it his own, but they had all the time in the world to develop that. And I think that's one of the charming things about the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie is they really spent the time on the writing side of things to make it what they wanted it to be.
Yeah, totally. We'll see what happens with the whole Marvel stuff. I mean, I would also agree that it's a blessing in the sense that we haven't had a Marvel movie proper for quite a while, which is kind of a nice break for, we were really reaching rather maybe critical capacity of comic book burnout, right?
Yeah,
like
needed a break.
For me and like, yourself probably and other people that are huge Marvel geeks and comic book nerds, it doesn't matter. I feel like it would take a lot for me to reach full burnout of that kind of stuff, but it was definitely like, okay, all right, we should probably pump the brakes on this a bit. And it's working. It's working. I'm now very much craving a comic book movie more than I was before. So,
and I will probably watch this stuff forever. I just really like it. I like all of it. I like liking things. And I'm still excited. I'm still looking forward to it. I don't know if I'll ever hit that level of burnout that I know a lot of people kind of have.
Yeah. Well, their loss, I guess.
Yeah, I know that there are people who
Yeah.
just need darker and grittier and edgier all the time. And, for those people, there's Batman.
Yeah, we give you the Snyder cuts.
We give you the Snyder Cut. We give you Robert Patterson beating people to a pulp for 45 minutes as like a young child would, bashing two action figures together, because that's really what it comes down to a lot of the time when I watch those films. Sorry.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Hey,
I
don't
still enjoy them. I
apologize.
can still watch them. Yeah.
Watch what you say, because I hear Pattinson's listening, and he's a regular
He is
listener
a
of the show.
big
So he,
fan of the Podcavern. Yeah.
yeah, specifically just Talking Tongue. Doesn't listen to anything else.
No, it's this one. It came up. We tweaked the algorithm a little bit on his Apple Podcasts app. Can I say Apple
That's right.
Podcasts? Will I get in trouble?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. That's fine. I mean, they haven't paid us yet, but we're waiting for the first paycheck.
Check's in the mail.
Yeah, I had Tim Cook's email at one point, so yeah, we could do that. Last Marvel news, and the reason why I'm talking about Marvel so much this week is because honestly, it was kind of a dead week for news per se. Like the bigger news was the PlayStation 5 event, which was really big. It was really good, but you kind of covered it. Like they had, they kind of flubbed up their pre-orders, and a price was announced for it, and a couple games were announced for it too. But I think the Marvel stuff's more interesting for this week. And She-Hulk was cast, which is Tatiana Maslany.
Who is Canadian?
I don't know
is that
much
right?
about her. I don't know much about her except that she won an Emmy for Orphan Black. So I was hoping you might know a little bit more about
and I
her.
haven't seen Orphan Black. That's another thing that's kind of in my backlog for when my kids are grown up enough that I can actually watch a lot of TV again. I'm sorry, I'm not. I don't know much about her beyond the fact that she's Canadian, which is kind of neat because we know that
Whoa.
the actor playing Shang-Chi, whose name I know,
Simu Liu, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
He's Canadian and in like a really big Canadian television property right now. And like Kim's Convenience, I love the show. I got into it late. I joined late in the game, but I really, really enjoy that show. I enjoy him as an actor. So more of these Canadian people that we haven't necessarily seen in the big ABC dramas, please. That's all I have
Totally.
there. It's always
Yeah,
exciting when we get
and
somebody new that we haven't seen anything from yet.
exactly. And She-Hulk is a fun character. There's lots to explore there. And I mean, for the people who don't know who She-Hulk is, maybe we can give you a little bit of a history lesson. Well, maybe not history. I don't want to bore people. You're like, so much comic book news this week. Oh my God.
History is
That's
boring.
what happens when
We should stay away from it and ignore it completely. Otherwise, how can
the
we
only
repeat
history
it?
we care about is the comic book history. And She-Hulk, we have Jennifer Walters, everyone. That's her regular name, I guess you could say, human name. She is the cousin of Bruce Banner. And how much do you know about She-Hulk, James?
So she's a practicing lawyer. She was a district
Yep.
attorney, I believe, for a length of time.
Yep.
My experience with Jennifer is just her dropping in and out of other properties that I was reading. I've never picked up an issue of She-Hulk. I certainly will. With the show coming out, I'll dig back into the catalog and see what's there, because I just like to know things going into it. I like to be inside when they drop those inevitable Easter eggs. So
Yeah, I've only ever seen her in like crossovers, like whenever the event, like when reading comic books and I'm reading like the Avengers, she's there. She's been in, like Fantastic Four, I believe, Heroes for Hire, Shield at some points too,
she
and
factored into
she
World War
is.
Hulk a little bit as well at the end.
Yeah, I think what happened was she got a blood transfusion from Bruce Banner one time, and that gave her the same abilities of hulking out, just like Bruce Banner, except the big factor with She-Hulk is that she retains her personality for the most part, retains her intelligence and emotional control, and she is able to just be Hulk. And kind of like how Professor Hulk in Endgame was a thing, she has that ability from the get-go. And with her transformation, she ends up being in that state for much more of the time than she is in human form, it seems like.
And in fact, I can't recall ever seeing her in human form in any of the things that I've read. So I don't want to say this without knowing. I'd need to look into it, but I don't think that she does often revert back to a normal human form.
No, I saw a tweet from Dan Slott, who wrote
Oh,
for
Dan.
Spider-Man for a long
I
time.
love Dan Slott.
Right? He's so
Well,
good.
so to get on a tangent quickly, Dan
Yeah,
Slott
please.
wrote the Superior Spider-Man story arc,
Yep.
which
Yep.
so many people just reviled and were terrible and mean and toxic at him for. But I
Oh,
really
so good though.
enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that whole arc. I liked that it felt very permanent while you were in it. Superior
Yeah.
Spider-Man by Dan Slott's definitely one to check out.
It's very, very good. It's so good. It's Doctor. For people who don't know, it's Octavius, Doctor Octopus. He
Freaky
ends up,
Fridays.
yeah, he ends up swapping bodies with Peter Parker, and Peter Parker is dead. Ooh, but he ends up being in the body of Peter Parker and being gifted with the abilities of Spider-Man, but his own mind is still there. So it's kind of a villain trying to be a hero, but still being kind of a villain at the same time. It's very fascinating stuff. Yeah. But She-Hulk, yeah, I believe Dan Slott said that she's had moments where she returns back to human state. It was like some sort of conscious blocker that kind of blocked her from being able to go back to that state. But she spends most of the time as She-Hulk is kind of the short end of it.
Yeah, that's my understanding of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Enough of the comic book stuff. I have one more news story for you that is Apple related. You like Apple stuff.
I do.
And usually I don't. You love corporations. We already established that.
Corporations are people. In fact, they're more important than the people. But go on.
That's right. This is actually news that I don't usually care about announcing this type of news, but I think it's handy for people to know. And not just iOS 14, which just came out, which I have an iPhone, and it's pretty great. It's pretty great. But that's not what I'm talking about here today. I'm talking about their subscription service called Apple One.
Apple One, yes.
Yeah, and I'm bringing this up because I feel like people should know about this, and it's actually pretty cool and pretty great. So essentially, they have kind of filtered this out into 3 different services. And what it is you can have an individual. Before, you'd have to pay for Apple Music separately, Apple TV Plus separately, Apple Arcade separately, iCloud storage separately, all of their shit separately. Finally, they have a way to group them all together for a price that is actually surprisingly decent for Apple. You know how they love to charge things way more than they should be. And James, what it is the individual packages. You can pay $15 a month for 50 gigabytes of iCloud storage, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, and Apple Arcade. That's just for the individual package for if you just wanted it. For the same thing, for $20 a month, $19.95, you can get 200 gigs of iCloud storage and everything I just mentioned for your whole family for $20 a month. Or now, you can pay for $30 a month.
Or are those Canadian dollars?
These are US dollars, but usually they translate pretty well. So I'm curious to see. Yeah, they're not. They shouldn't go too much higher. I mean, like when Mulan came out, it was $30 Canadian, I believe, still too. So take that for what you will. And I'm only saying that because the $30 was like a US pricing. We're like, oh man, are we gonna have to spend $50 on Mulan? Because that's a lot of money. And the Premier Access, which is $30 a month, which is 2 terabytes of iCloud storage, music, TV, arcade, news, and fitness, which is their brand new app thing for people who want to get fit.
Which is super intriguing to me too. The whole fitness, like Apple Fitness thing, super intriguing. Because it feels like they're finally figuring out like one of the big purposes markets for their watch are fitness nuts. And they're really going to leverage that with this.
Yeah, exactly. And Laura's watch just kind of conked out the other day. So, yeah, it's just wait, dumb.
What series was hers?
3.
Mine's a series 1. I'm on borrowed time.
I got it too. Yeah. Hers had a small, she put it down and then like a single hairline crack went from one end to the other. And that caused false touch. on the entire display.
Oh
And as
no.
someone formerly working for this big corporation, it is not worth it to replace it because it costs a lot of money
And it will
and you can
never be the
spend
same.
well, they replace it with a new watch, quote unquote, but for $50 more, you can get a new watch. Let's just say that. The replacement program's just garbage. So, Apple, there you go.
Yeah, and that whole Apple One thing, they definitely got my attention because I'm already shelling out money for cloud storage every month. So when I eventually start to look at that seriously, that's going to factor in for sure because my whole computer ecosystem is Apple products, so they've got my attention. They've definitely got me looking at them.
Yeah, for like right now, we spend $20 a month anyways on everything that was mentioned in the family pack, except this time, if we do this, we get Apple Arcade on top of that, which is something I tried out for the trial month, which was cool, but I would never pay for it separately. And now if we have it, it's like, cool, I got that now. If I ever want to interact with this thing, I have the option, which is great.
And we've talked about it before, like with these new subscription services entering in, you can't just be video anymore. Like you can't just come into the marketplace and have video and that be your thing. Because Amazon, like if you sign up for Amazon Prime, you get the free shipping, you get the music, you get you have to have something else if you're going to come in or be Disney, and only Disney can be Disney. So they got that one cornered. You've got to have something else.
I guess. Netflix, because they got in early.
Netflix got there early. Yeah, I think that's why people are still happy to be there. Although, again and again, their 2-season, 3-season runs of shows is really it bugs me, but maybe that's for another time.
Yeah. In like Apple TV Plus, I was mentioning this to a friend the other day, and it's kind of like there's good stuff there, but I would never, ever recommend anyone pay for it. We got a full year because Laura bought a phone, and that was cool. But like, it's such sparse content there. There's just not enough. It's like embarrassing how not a lot of content there is.
Do they license their other content as well, or is it just their originals?
I think it's mostly just their stuff.
Yeah,
but there's not enough of their stuff to make it worth it. Like it's even if it's $5 a month or whatever it is, it's like, well, there's still just not enough stuff on here to make it worth it. There's too many other subscription services out there, which is why Apple One makes sense to me.
Yeah, and they have the money to be able to do something like that. They're a company that can definitely. They can take the 2 years it takes to build up enough of a catalog to get people interested. Because there's, as you said, there's some stuff in there that I'd really like to check out. Lauren Bouchard, the creator of Bob's Burgers, has a show on there that I'd love to see because Bob's Burgers is definitely something I keep coming back to. Yeah.
Central Park is what it's called.
Central Park. That's right.
Yeah. All right, James, here we are. We are ready. We are not going to talk about, again, I'm glossing over some big video game stuff, but I want to get into the topic of this week because, no one needs to hear about the Harry Potter RPG, although it looks kind of cool, but no one wants to bring up Harry Potter.
We don't have a release date.
J.K. Rowling's the worst.
J.K. Rowling is the worst.
She is the worst and continues to be the worst.
Never meet your heroes, kids.
God damn it, JK. Harry Potter is ours and you can just go away now. But anyways, we are not going to talk about any of that stuff because today we are talking about something glorious that I was it was on my radar, but you suggested it. And I was like, you know what? I've heard enough people talk about how great this thing is that I have to check it out. And here we are. James, do you want to introduce the show of the week?
Yeah,
not just movie, show.
It's a show, but it's built into some very important 1980s movies. So we're of course talking about Cobra Kai.
Fighting positions. Fire! I just don't know why you'd ever want to bring back Cobra Kai. We do not train to be merciful here. Mercy is for the weak. You may know the moves, but none of that matters unless you have balance.
It really is interesting. I think interesting is probably the best descriptor adjective that I can put on it. There's so much going on.
What is Cobra Kai?
So Cobra Kai is a Netflix YouTube show. It was originally YouTube, and I think it got taken over by Netflix after YouTube didn't want to continue it or after their premium streaming service blew up.
Well,
one of those two.
they pivoted their YouTube Red stuff to like documentary type stuff, and they weren't producing original shows like this anymore.
Right.
Like, I think this was the only show that I saw on YouTube Red that I was like, I'd watch that, but I'm not paying for YouTube Red.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and they even put out the first couple of episodes for free when it was on YouTube Red. Now a Netflix show. And basically what's happened is they've taken two characters from the Karate Kid films from like 1984, I want to say. And they've taken these two characters from Karate Kid and they've looked at it through the lens of character Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother. And they've written the most glorious Billy Zabka fan fiction where we've decided that like maybe the Karate Kid, Daniel LaRusso, was not the hero of the story. And we're going to pivot and we're going to look at Billy Zabka's character and say, maybe Johnny is actually the hero of this story. Maybe there's more going on here that we just need to look at and we need to see the other side of this. So I've referenced Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother because the character famously misunderstood the point of the Karate Kid movies. When you watch Karate Kid, Daniel LaRusso is supposed to be the hero. Like he is the protagonist. He is the guy that you're supposed to root for. And Barney Stinson like famously didn't get that and thought that Johnny Lawrence, the villain, the antagonist, was supposed to be the hero. He was the Karate Kid. And that's basically how this show is played out. It's finished its second season, third season is forthcoming, and there's so much to unpack with it. There's so much going on. There
really is. Yeah, I can't believe I've been telling everybody who would listen that I am completely shook, is the kids say. And
you do say that one. That's true.
Okay, great. I'm slapping. No, still not, doesn't work. Okay,
keep
good.
trying though. We'll get it happening.
Liddy, no. Okay. Basically, James, I was hooked after the first episode. I was completely hooked. I haven't been hooked on a TV show like this in a while. I was just completely in awe of my liking for this because my experience with the Karate Kid is I've watched all of them. I watched the originals, which I liked. I watched the Next Generation Karate Kid, and then I watched the Jaden Smith Karate Kid, which I'm a defender of because I love Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
And I thought that movie was still good, albeit kind of long, but still good. And I was like, oh man, how is this going to be any good? Because we've seen a lot of stuff come back from the 80s and reboots and all this stuff. And we're like, is this a cash grab to just like cash in on this nostalgia of our like for Karate Kid? Like I would say I liked it, not loved it. But now this makes me love the Karate Kid like through and through. It is such an amazing tribute in a lot of ways to the original stuff with lots of 80s cheesiness going on in the show, but it's modernized as well. And what they do is a perfect blend between cheesiness and I don't know, they just do their own thing. Like they pay perfect care of what happened in those original films and they
just add another dimension to it, right? Like that's the beautiful thing is they take these small glancing moments from this super campy movie, which again, like had a huge influence on me as a young kid. And like I did martial arts my young life and like it takes these small glancing moments and it just adds like a whole new dimension to them, this whole new depth to it. Like am I allowed to spoil things? Can we?
Let's wait a little bit before we spoil. Well, yeah, let's wait a little bit before we spoil it, but we can hit spoilers in a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. I won't dive too deep into it, but there are characters who, you really they were super one dimensional in Karate Kid in the first movie, and they really play those out. Like we didn't know, right? They don't have time in a 90-minute film to give us everything about this, and now they can do that. And they can even seem to just like actually use sequences from the original movie in this show, which is great too. They're not just referencing them as one-offs. They actually they've interspersed footage from the original movies into it, which is just beautiful.
It is. And like the actual karate in this show gets so good. Like it gets so much better because the original Karate Kid, there wasn't the fight choreography that we see into this show. Like the back of then, it was like very, very cheesy and like kind of bad, but like also perfect in the same way.
Well, and
And in this show,
have you taken martial arts classes, Tongue? Is that something you did in your young life,
yep,
or you do now?
I was black belt in Taekwondo
Oh, there you
back
go.
in the day. Yeah.
So when you watch the first Karate Kid, like he is very much a white belt. Like the way that he's trying his best to do some of the movements, and you can see like he was obviously very new at it. And yeah, you're right. They're far beyond that at this point.
Yeah, like the kids in this show do some really incredible fight choreography, and I think it's hilarious whenever the adults fight. Like Ralph Macchio, William Zabka is actually seems very capable of making it look like he's doing some pretty awesome fighting, but Ralph Macchio, he's always had some weird awkwardness when it comes to him fighting, and that's still present here. But at the same time, it's still amazing for some reason. I can't keep my eyes off of it.
And it's funny too because I have to wonder if that's an intentional choice, because like Billy Zabka he's doing this like MMA style fighting where it looks really cool. It's not practical in any way, shape, or form. And if you were teaching a traditional art, you probably wouldn't have people doing that. But like it really feeds into this MMA style, I'm just going to punch the heck out of somebody until they bleed style of things. And then when you look
No mercy.
Yeah, no mercy, exactly. Strike hard, strike first, something else.
No mercy, that's the third one.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And yeah, when you see like the Daniel LaRusso character, Ralph Macchio is really trying to match the traditional style. Like he's really trying, you can see where, so like when he punches, right, and he pulls back his other fist, you can see where he's placing it. It looks super awkward, but he's been taught that. Like he's really trying to do the elements, the things that if you were doing one of those martial arts and you were being graded on it, they'd be looking for, right? Like when we would do a belt test, those were important things that you'd be looked at for. If you're not doing those elements, then you wouldn't be successful. So it's funny because he does look super awkward, but there are things about those arts that just are really, really awkward to make your body do.
Absolutely. And honestly, like I wouldn't want him to fight like Billy Zabka in this. Like I want him to emulate his character from the early stuff, and he does. And I've heard a complaint, although it's not I don't feel like it's a true complaint. It's that Ralph Macchio and to some extent, at the same extent, William Zabka are not good actors. And I could see where you're coming from with that. Like they are not in a lot of stuff, like especially Ralph Macchio, who's done mostly Karate Kid stuff throughout his career. But at the same time, they are perfect because these are the characters that they embodied back in the 80s.
Yep.
And they perfectly go back into these characters, but with an adult's like lens. Like that's what their characters are 34 years later. And it's just something about it is just mesmerizing to me.
Well, and the thing about it for me too, and this is like my big thing with watching these 2 seasons that they've got out now, it's like it's about how grown men deal with like generational trauma. It's about like dealing with the trauma of what adults put you through when you were young, right? Like that's like the big theme that keeps arching through is like toxic masculinity destroyed these 2 men early on. Now they're grown men. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to like show the next generation what the right thing to do is. But God, they didn't have like strong leadership when they were little. Like they didn't have that nurture at all. And so they're totally messed up as they're trying to like show the next generation the right way to do it. They were shown an awful way to do it. Like they were put through hell. And like
I would say, go ahead, keep going.
No, go.
Well, I would say to that point, I feel like Daniel LaRusso's character is very heavily influenced with Mr. Miyagi. And I think they do a wonderful continued tribute to Mr. Miyagi throughout the show. Like he is not a character that they say off once. It's more like they are trying to encapsulate his spirit. And the character of Daniel LaRusso is constantly being like, what would Mr. Miyagi do? Or like, I miss you, Mr. Miyagi. Like, I wish I could be a teacher like you. It's an amazing thing where he tries to continue the teachings that he was taught. So I think like in that sense, he had a great teacher, but he still kind of messed up from being bullied by Billy Zabka, right?
Yeah,
So
well, and Miyagi was imperfect too, right? Like that was one of the scenes. Like later on, you could see that, like in the loss of his wife, like he had really been messed up by his experience with the war too, which was another.
yeah,
That was another thing that was so great about Pat Morita is like the depth that he brought to that character by being able to say like, he's got his own flaws too. He's dealing with his own stuff, even though like
yeah.
he is obviously like when you look at the two the two possibilities for a teacher, which one you probably would pick, but like he's clearly got his own stuff that he's dealing with too.
Which is great because in this show, they really, like you mentioned that it's not one dimensional like how the 80s show or 80s movies were. It's more, they dive deeper into these characters and their psyche and how they are now. But what we get as well, and is a huge part of the show, is we get a new generation of kids that are learning karate, and there's a kind of like a wink and nod of like karate is like a big deal again in this city, which is like karate in 2020. It's like, what? It's kind of like silly,
and that's
but
super
it's also
cool too. Like, so
yeah,
I've got these neighbors who the other day were outside in their backyard with like, this kid had a broom handle, right? And he was spinning it at his friend. And I was like, this is going to end really badly. But in the back of my mind, I'm starting to wonder, like, is this catching on? Like, it's on Netflix. It's there, right? And there's like
right.
there's enough of the elements of like TV that maybe I wouldn't want my kid watching, like some of the language that these people are using, like without somebody there to be
They
like,
do
yeah,
use the
it's
word
not okay.
pussy quite a bit.
I know. I flinch every time. Every time. But
Yeah,
I think there's enough of that element of like campy danger that it would pull kids
right.
in. So I'm watching these kids in the backyard next door and thinking like, did they watch that? Is that why they're doing that? Is this a thing again? Like, is this karate's 2020 moment? Is it going to be a thing? And
Right.
I don't know.
I don't
I don't know
know.
them that
That's
well, but
interesting.
yeah,
Huh. I think
I,
there's
it's all I can
kids in
do
the
not to go and ask them about the water pressure.
I was gonna say the kids in the show are incredible. I was not expecting to like them. I was always kind of more interested in the rivalry, which is very good with Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence. That rivalry, Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do, like still really good. In fact, even better than it was in the original Karate Kid, I would say.
Oh
But the
yeah.
kids and how they navigate their teenage years and that awkward, lots of like, there's a lot of tropes in here, but they work so well in this show of like, will they, won't they's. There's like a bad guy turned soft. And like, there's even layers to in the first season, especially you have a kid who is training under Johnny Lawrence, the Cobra Kai, who's a lighthearted kid who kind of gets taught the way of Cobra Kai, which is like their lessons are a lot more harsh, right? And he becomes like a hard soul as well. And you're like, this is kind of interesting. I mean, like it's such a easy thing to do, but they did it, which is let's see the lens of the bad guy or the bad guy, quote unquote, or like the more hard karate dojo, and see this all fleshed out. And I would say it's their kids that study under this dojo are a little bit more layered than I would have expected from a Karate Kid property.
And even at the same time, they're like, one of the things I appreciate about the show is they don't take themselves too seriously. Whereas they've created a character through the second season who directly makes fun of the transformation of that character. It's like a wink and a nod, right? That because that guy, as he comes through and he develops himself, they're directly making fun of a trope that they were like really using as an important story element through the first season and through the second season as well. But they're
Yeah.
winking a nod, poking fun at it the whole time. So I love the meta layer that goes on with that as well.
It's so easy to picture in my mind how they could have fucked this up, honestly, but there is such a perfect balance, as Daniel LaRusso would say, finding that balance of what is new and what is old about this show, blending tropes together, but also introducing creativity into it and having a great level of fight choreography on top of that, and paying perfect homage to the Karate Kid of yore, but making something beautifully new. And I have nothing but good things to say about this show. I'm just so shocked that I like it
hope
so
and my
much.
worry for the show right now is where they're going to go next with it. And I really hope
Yeah.
that they lean into that reimagining of the genre, that you don't, they've assumed a lot about what the high school experience is like. And while I'm sure that that is the experience for many kids in many places, if you don't have media that creates new archetypes and new ideas, you won't move anything. So one of the things I'm really hopeful for is that they do push that boundary a little bit, be creative, create something that's different and weird and its own little world, because that's what these shows can do for kids if they
I mean,
create something different and new.
it's already weird because you got a war between two karate schools, and they are like the karate in this universe, which was made fun of, but now it's in
What's
in
weird
the
about
second
that
season.
though? Was that not the case
It's
when you
kind of
were in
just
high
like,
school? You didn't have karate gangs fighting each other?
yeah, I just love how they're like, so karate's the big thing right now, and you got karate gangs. I don't know. There's something about that that's just so funny. And
Oh man, it is. Like
yeah,
there's nothing that would be intimidating about karate gangs fighting. Like you know, you have real gang throwdowns in parking lots where it's just brutal. Like sure, that's kind of scary, but if they like whipped into choreographed movement, that would definitely undercut the seriousness of whatever drug deal had gone wrong there, right?
yeah, for sure. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is like, how do you feel? Okay, so we kind of talked about the kids. We talked about Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso, and maybe the other thing that I want to point out is I think a key factor about this show is how they deal with relationships and how they deal with like father-son relationships and mother-daughter relationships and just partner relationships. I think that is a big factor of what makes the show work. What do you think?
Yeah, that's another one of those running themes throughout the whole thing, and like what we whose responsibility it is for these kids, I guess, like is a big one that jumps out to me. It's probably because of the work that I do and the stage of life that I'm in, but like whose responsibility is it to make sure that these kids don't get damaged in the same way that we may have been, without like any disrespect to the generation that raised us. I know that they were trying their best, but like whose responsibility is it? And I think that like that responsibility becomes a theme, yeah, in the relationship between Daniel LaRusso and his wife, because she's supposed to be this big, business magnate running the thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then he runs off to do something that's a pet project, and they don't understand each other. So there's this tension that goes on there. Yeah, the relationships are a big thing, and then come like the relationship and then the responsibility within a relationship. That's a huge
Yeah.
running theme throughout all of it.
And yeah, I think it goes back to what I'm thinking with the show that I like about it so much is that not everything's black and white. Johnny kind of mentions that later in the show too, where he becomes a much more layered character than he ever was in the original. And it's essentially that Johnny's a badass and he believes he's a badass, and he's kind of a hard kind of motherfucker, kind of beat everyone up kind of thing, but he also has a soft spot. And Daniel LaRusso has a heart of gold, but also has his own kind of demons as well. And he's not as good as people think he was in like the original Karate Kid. I just love that showing two sides of a coin for the same person. They do that
Yeah.
very well in the show.
Yeah, and to see that Johnny Lawrence like recognizes that he broke a kid who like really was a Daniel LaRusso. Like he had a Daniel LaRusso and he had the opportunity to create another Daniel LaRusso, like in like growing this young human, and he blew it so hard. And just watching him dealing with the fact that he blew it while Daniel LaRusso is, trying his best to capture the kid that really at the beginning of things was the real badass. Like he was the kid who was into the bad stuff. Like I'm dancing around names here because I don't want to give anything away. I want people to watch this and to enjoy it. But like the kid that Daniel LaRusso ends up mentoring, he's the one who gave me the creeps at the beginning. Like he really kind of, I don't know, there was something very unsettling about that young man.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And then, well, whatever. Let people watch it. All right, James, I have two more questions for you. My first question is, was brought up from a friend of mine here, and she watched 2 episodes of Karate Kid, or sorry, not 2 episodes of Cobra Kai, and then we ended up talking a little bit about it. And she brought this point up, and I'm not sure. I just like to hear your point about it, I guess. It's because she watched a video on this topic, and I'm dancing around it, but I'll say it right now. It's called lamp lighting. Have you heard of this before?
No, but I'm assuming it has something to do with gaslighting. Please tell me about it.
Okay, so Urban Dictionary, which I'm not sure is the best way to describe it, is the process of convincing a significant other they are insane or paranoid through the use of technology. I don't think that sounds more like gaslighting. The way that it was described to me was that essentially making fun of a situation or rather, okay, how do I explain this properly? It's kind of like you bring up important topics. Let's just say LGBTQ, for example, or let's just say Black Lives Matter. This is not happening in the show. I'm just giving an example. And you kind of bring it up in a medium like a TV show, but you quickly dismiss it as a comedy beat. So you're essentially saying like, this exists, you recognize that it exists, but you don't do anything about it in the show. You kind of just say, yeah, this is a thing. And then you kind of swiftly put it aside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I see where somebody would come from with that, and they're spot on. Like there are a lot of things that, you could be doing more harm than good. I think like that's one of the things you always want to be responsible about. You know that when you have a platform like this, when you've got a Netflix show, you got a lot of eyes. You've got a lot of unsupervised eyes, and the unsupervised part becomes my big concern all the time. Like you could absolutely be doing more harm than good. And if you know that you're doing more harm than good, you have to stop. You have to make a plan to fix that. If you want to continue, you have to bring in the right people to make that happen. And there are probably writers that you could bring into a room that would be able to treat those with the seriousness that they absolutely need. Now more than ever, but like they've always needed them as well. So I've got to stop saying that. I totally see that.
The reason why I bring it up is that there are moments in this show which might be able to be considered lamplighting. I'm not going to pretend I am an expert on this. Clearly, from my definition, I am not, and I think I'm a little too close and too in love with the show to kind of see all of its potential flaws. But essentially, there is a moment in the show which might be considered this, where they kind of they have a character come out and essentially it's a very small moment in the show, James, you might not remember, but basically they're talking about like fighting against hatred and fighting against like all the wrong things in the world, but they do it in like a really cheesy way, and everybody else in the audience of the show, they're kind of in a tournament situation, kind of like roll their eyes, including their the announcers, and they're like, okay, let's move on to the actual fighting kind of thing.
That the tournament scene, right? Is that what you're talking
they
about?
Bring it like important topics up, but they kind of use it as a punchline instead of like actually bringing the stuff to the forefront, I guess.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. No, I absolutely remember that happening, and I remember the cringe that I felt at it, because I get it. Like I get you're trying to make a joke, but you're not punching up. So don't.
Yeah, it's so you recognize there's something bad, but you're not actually doing anything about it, and you use it as a punchline instead of a way to move the overall conversation forward. And maybe that's a fault in the show in some sense, is they don't maybe they're not as, I'm not going to say they're not progressive, because they definitely bring stuff up, and they deal a lot with like relationships, which I really like, and point that stuff out, but they probably have room to grow in those areas. Would you agree?
And that sounds like a writer's problem to me. Like when that kind of a scene gets through, you either A, didn't have a diverse enough writing team, or B, your writing room is not a safe place, and the people who would have said absolutely do not do this, they don't feel safe enough to bring that up, or they're laughed at when they bring it up, or, oh, you're, the social justice warrior, leave it alone kind of thing. So yeah, that's definitely a writer's problem, and it's going to keep happening. My hope for the show, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, there's a tough thing with the show, though, and that is that when you're writing and I'm not making excuses, but I think there is a level to this, and that when you're writing for a show like this, where you have the main protagonist, which is Johnny Lawrence, who is a guy who was a bully, who is stuck in the past, who doesn't know modern technology, doesn't know anything about like pronouns. Like this is his character. Like he's not progressive in this way. He, in a lot of ways,
He's a
probably
stereotype.
He's a stereotype of this, like
He's a stereotype.
this
Like he's
bully. Yeah.
like there's an archetype of the intolerant white man, and that's what he is. That's what he needs to be, so that you can try to grow him
Yeah.
in some way, right? Like he needs to be that. He needs to represent that. And there's
So in some
so many
ways,
ways to demonstrate that.
when you have kids that are telling him that like there are multiple genders, or you can have girls fighting for karate, and he's just like, what? Like in some level, I understand this, because, and it's funny because that's who his character is. Like it makes sense that he doesn't know what these things are, and he's kind of like mad and frustrated about how he's kind of like not in it anymore, you know? And I think on a character perspective, that totally makes sense. So I don't know where I'm really going with this, rather than like, I think it's a tricky thing where you still want to be true to the character, right? Like Johnny Lawrence shouldn't automatically be accepting to these like new ways of thinking right away.
Yeah,
I think
you
he
can't
should
make it
grow
easy.
into accepting. Yeah. So there is a balance of like, of course, make those moments comedic because it's funny that he doesn't know, but also help him grow into it being accepting.
Yep. And it shouldn't be easy. You're absolutely spot on there. Like it shouldn't be, it's not easy in real life. So if you make it too easy in TV, it's not believable anymore. You undercut
Yeah.
your own message. You undercut your own character growth if you do that. And yeah, he's gonna continue to mess things up. Like that's
Yeah.
that's who he is, and
And
that's how he was raised, and he still thinks that those things are good, right? Like he's still got that problem of like the remembering the 80s fondly, and Ronald Reagan is great and all of that. Like
yeah.
no, it was really
Yeah. And
really
calling
harmful and
people.
toxic.
Yeah, exactly. And he's still calling babes chicks, and like,
Yeah.
but this is who he is. Like, it's not like I feel like like people should recognize that this is who this character is, and they're not saying that by him calling people chicks that that's the right way to talk. It's just that he is hard to change, and he's slowly learning, and that maybe that's a spoiler, but he's slowly growing into a more respectable human being as episodes go on.
I
He's
don't
just
think
kind of
that's a
fighting.
spoiler though. I think that's like anytime you
Yeah.
see a character like that, you want them to grow and develop, right? Like if you watched
Yeah.
Avatar The Last Airbender and saw Zuko and you were like, he better be like this in 3 seasons or I'm going to be pissed. Like you're
Yeah.
in it for the wrong things.
Exactly. So like I think he has his own like version of what badass is, and that's a very 80s version of what badass is, very black and white, all this other stuff, and he's just trying to cope with the way things should be and the way things are in this day and age. So
And
that's
coping.
my long
Yeah,
way of
that's
yeah.
yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's my long way of saying that like I'm not sure if things are intentionally lamplighting in those situations. For example, I think there are aspects like that one that I mentioned with the tournament of that random guy kind of talking about hatred and whatever. But it's also like they have this, they need to show versions and ways that Cobra Kai is badass, quote unquote, the way Johnny thinks it's badass and how he's teaching these kids. So like they are bullies in some ways as well, right? So like you can't have them being nice to people as well. So it's kind of
Well,
tricky. I
and if
don't know
they
how
take
I'd
the
write it.
opportunity to like dig into the fact that the bulk of the anti-bullying work being done looks a lot like bullying. Like it's really that it's the we don't know the best way to attempt to respond to bullying because we keep coming at it with this anti-bullying lens that looks a lot like bullying, folks. Like it looks exactly like the behavior that you didn't want in the first place. And
Yeah.
responding with that behavior is not making any kind of a difference. It's just perpetuating that cycle. So like if this show can move to a place where it can start to break that down or confront that would be really cool. Again, to like have something in a major media at this level of platform where people can look at that and say, yeah, they talked about that. That would be really
Yeah.
cool.
I think they are moving towards that. I'm hopeful. I mean, with the two, I mean, like I wasn't expecting to watch 2 seasons in like in this short period of time. But also, the episodes aren't very long. They're 30-minute episodes, and they're only 10 episodes a season. So pretty easy to crush, to be
God
honest.
bless streaming media, man. We're not tied to this 40-minute, like hour long Oh, the hour kills everything. It kills everything.
Yeah,
You
it
don't
was
need
very
that, and that's
easy
where
for
filler
me to
comes from.
exactly. It was very easy for me to crush this show, and I really, really enjoyed it. James, so we are at the end of our talk about Cobra Kai, but before we let you go, can you rate this show on your own scale?
I would probably give it a giraffe, if I'm honest.
You're giving it a giraffe? How many
I'm giving
crane
it.
kicks would you give it?
How many crane kicks would I give it?
Yeah, how many crane Daniel LaRusso kicks would you give it?
Are we out of 5 crane kicks?
Let's go crane kicks over badass snakes.
Oh, okay. All right. I'd give it 4 crane kicks.
Over 10 badass snakes?
Yeah.
3 badass snakes?
No, you know
Okay.
what? Over 3. Yeah, let's do that.
Over
That's
3.
a
Because
very
it's
weird
better.
fraction. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for introducing me to this show and making me watch this. It was a pleasure, honestly. It was so much fun for me. I am thrilled to watch another season of the show.
Yeah, I'm excited for that as well. Lots that they
It's going
can
to be
do.
great. Yeah. Before we get going, I'm going to say that, James, I want you to plug something that you are creatively working on, or maybe something else that you enjoy that you just want to plug for the people at home.
There's lots of creative stuff that I'm working toward right now that I can't really talk about yet. So can I just mysteriously plug things and
Yes.
say that when it comes out, I'll let you know, and you can throw it out to the pod cavern and see what people do with it.
Absolutely. How about, is there another show that you can recommend for the people at this moment, or movie or video game, something that would bring people happiness, or a comic book series?
If I'm going to talk about comic series, I'm going to tell people to go back to the 2008 Keith Giffen, Dan Abnett Annihilation event. Go read that. Just because, man, it was some good character development. If you like Thanos, if you enjoyed Thanos at all and his appearances, go see where we could see Thanos end up like 20 movies from now. Go read the Annihilation event from 2006.
Everyone loves Thanos. People have crushes on Thanos. You know, they're into that purple.
Yeah. Well, just go see how messed up he got by a relationship. Go read that event.
All right, you heard it there. For me, you can find the rest of the shows in the Pod Cavern at www.podcavern.com. Check out all the wonderful, great, amazing, jubilant Jigglypuff shows in the Pod Cavern. And have some fun with us. And listen to more guests like James, because James has been on Ranked before, and you can hear his opinion. Twice.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you can find all those shows and James in the Pod Cavern, just lurking about, hanging around. And for now, we have to say goodbye to James. So, James, do you want to give us your famous catchphrase?
Well, yes, I do. And this is James Beattie here saying literally anything.
Literally anything's his catchphrase. Bye, everybody.